But I wanted to do that because I wanted you to see this beautiful world that God created, okay? And God did create a beautiful world. How many of y'all have enjoyed being out here in God's creation today? I have enjoyed it too. I actually get to live in the mountains now, which before I moved to Ruidoso, I never would have thought that I would have loved living in the mountains. Like I was always Texas, flat plains, prairie, like that's the prettiest thing you can get. And I still kind of believe that, but I really also enjoy living in the mountains too. And so I just love being able to see the beautiful things that God has created for us. And so I'm hoping that you're enjoying this. Have y'all had a good first day of camp today? Yeah. I love camp. Okay, if I could get a job where all I did was go to camp all year long, I would do that. But only if some of the guys that I get to work with got that same job with me, because that's part of it. Because I love to get to see Cliff, and I love to see Nate, and I love to see all the other guys that we work with at Encounter and Champion, and we get to all be here together. I love that my parents are here. My parents, guys, give them a round of applause. So I just love being here. I wanted to start off just kind of a silly way to get this idea of this world that God created. And because all of us look at this world, there's one world that we all live on, and all of us look at it a little bit differently. Okay, how many of you guys are oldest siblings? Like you're the oldest in your family?
Yes.
How many of you love being the oldest sibling? Pretty good. All right, put your hands down. How many of you are the youngest siblings? How many of you love being the baby of the family? Middle always gets forgotten. So. I am the baby of my family, and I'll tell you what, it's pretty sweet. Okay, because all the things that my sister had to wait to do, like she had to wait until she was like 14 or 15 to go see a movie. But guess what? Mom and Dad didn't want to find a babysitter for me by myself, so I got to go when I was 13. So that's awesome. So baby siblings, there's some good things to being the baby. You get to do all the things that your siblings get to do. You get to do them earlier. Your parents have kind of figured out how to be better parents already, and so they don't make the same mistakes they did with their older siblings. And they're a little bit more lenient. They let a few things slide. I can tell you that in my own life, I have 3 kids, and our oldest kid, whenever he was born, it was like the most bizarre thing ever. I remember bringing him home from the hospital, and I was holding him in my arms, and we got home, and it was like all precious and sweet, and I was holding him, and then I was like, oh, I don't want to hold him anymore. I was tired, not that I stopped loving him, but I was just tired of holding him, and I needed to do other things. And I was looking around like, I don't know how to put a baby down. Like, where do you put a baby? And like, you set him on the couch, or you just lay him on the floor, and it was so bizarre. I was like, I have this baby, and I don't know what to do with it. And by the time we had Clark, who was our youngest, that's Clark right there, and whenever we had Clark, I was changing him on the changing table, and I turned around and he like fell off of the changing table. That's how lax I became as a parent, because I stopped worrying about all these little things. I was worried like, if I set him on the floor, is a dog going to step on him, and that might kill my baby. You stop worrying about those things. And so as you get older, the way you view the world changes. How many of you older siblings, you look at your youngest siblings, and you think, man, it's not fair. They get to do all these things that I never got to do. How many of you think that? Yeah. And you think, man, my parents are so lame because I had to wait and do this, and they wouldn't let me do that. And my younger siblings get to do everything. How many of you think your parents are lame in some form or fashion? It's okay, I'm not going to tell them. All right, and then how many of you younger siblings think, man, my parents are lame because I have to wear all these hand-me-down clothes. How many of you got some hand-me-down clothes? I didn't, because I had a sister. Alright, but all of us, even in the same family, even those of us growing up in the same family with the same parents, with the same house, with the same pets, going to the same schools, we grow up, and the way we view the world is very different. All right, from an oldest sibling standpoint to a youngest sibling standpoint, even in that same family environment, the way we view the world is different. That is called world view. How many of you ever heard of world view before? Ever heard that phrase? Okay. Basically, all it is it means that all of your combined experiences, all the things that have happened to you, all the things you've ever heard, all the things you've ever done, all those things create this unique perspective of looking at the world. And no one else sees the world the same way that you do, or that you see the world. And that's an important thing because the way that we view the world changes the way that we respond to the world. All right, let me show you what I mean. I'm going to show you a few pictures. I got to point out the computer on the screen. All right, so here we have some food. Here we have some more food. And here we have even more food. Okay? And I'm showing you 3 different kinds of food because, to illustrate a point, and to illustrate the way that the way we view the world changes the way we respond to it. Okay? This first one right up here. All right, how many of y'all think that looks like fancy food? Right? That's fancy, okay? Like you don't go to McDonald's. You don't go to McDonald's and they don't give you eggs on a plate that look like that, right? At McDonald's. It's like where it comes in little rings and preformed food. At the highest economic level, the way that you perceive food, the number one most important question asked by someone at the highest economic level is my food presented well? All right, these are studies that have been done throughout all these different economic classes to say, how does the world respond to food? The highest economic level looks at this and they say, is my food presented well? All right, they could go to Denny's and they could get eggs and bacon and pay $7.99. But sometimes people like to pay $50 for eggs and bacon because it looks pretty. All right? It is weird, right? But they do it. And like, oh, but look how well it's presented and the colors. Oh, it's just beautiful. And they like sit there and they stare at their food for a few minutes before they eat it, and they just soak it in. And for some people, that's very important. That's the most important thing. Is my food presented well? Not only does it have to taste good, not only does it have to fill me up, it's going to look good too. Right? That's the number one question that people ask at the highest economic level. All right, here in the middle, the good old burger and fries. How many of you like burger and fries? I love Me too. At the middle class, all right, which probably most of us right here, if we're talking about an economic level, most of us probably fit into this middle class. It's a pretty big zone, but most of us probably fit in here. And who wants to guess what the number one most important question is for the middle class when it comes to food? Does it taste good? That's right. That's all they care about is, does it taste good? All right, and they'll go and they don't care if it's, I mean, for me, there's a place in Loving, Texas I live in, it's called Lone Wolf. And it's awesome, and it tastes amazing, but it looks awful, and you feel like you're dirty when you walk in there. But it doesn't matter because the food tastes so good, and I just eat the burritos all day long. Okay. All right, and that's the most important question for us. It's kind of in the middle class. Does it taste good? I don't care if it's pretty, as long as it tastes good. And whenever you describe your food to someone, you don't ever go into details about what it looked like most of the time. You're like, oh, we went to this restaurant and the food tasted amazing. Like, that's how you relate to food. Is, does it taste good? All right. And then here in the bottom right corner, we have, it looks like chili, but it's not. Okay. It's just a big bowl of brown slop. Okay. And whenever you get to the lowest economic level, all right, I'm talking like third world countries here. I'm talking about places where they don't necessarily have running water, they don't have electricity, they're not as technologically advanced as we are. The number one most important question that they ask is, what? Is it food? No. Is it enough? That's their number one question. They don't say, does it taste good? Oh, no, I'm not really into that kind of food, so I'll pass. They don't ever say that. They say, is that enough food so that I can live through the rest of today, so that I can wake up tomorrow and go out and find enough food again? Because that's what my life is. It's not about, does it taste good or does it look good? They don't turn their nose up at food. They're like, here's food. Their number one question is it enough? That's what they want. Is it enough to sustain them? And you may say, well, why are we talking about food? Very much because we do something very similar to this outside of just our eating habits, but we do something very similar to this in our spiritual life. Okay? And basically what happens, instead of being at economic levels, it's kind of where you are at different age levels. You see a progression happen. Okay? And I have some examples for you here. Right now, at your age, most of you are up here in this top left corner. Alright? And whenever you talk about the gospel, whenever you're talking about how you relate to Jesus and not food, you're asking yourself the question, is it presented well? You may not know that you're asking that question, but you are. And that's the reason that we have camps like this, where we have beautiful buildings that you can come and beautiful scenery outside, because we know that if we just said, hey, we're going to go read the Bible together, how many of you would have signed up and said, drive me 6 hours, I'm going? No? Maybe one or two of you. I question that. Most of us would say, no, that's all right. I'll just stay home. But whenever you have it presented so well in this beautiful place with this multimedia system, and you have all these beautiful trees and these awesome cabins and these awesome counselors, and all these people come together to put great classes together for you, then you're like, okay, it's presented well enough, I will go and I will attend. I will listen. I don't know what that was. But we ask that question, and we don't even know it. And that's why we have camps like Encounter. That's why we do big youth rallies, because we want you guys to come, and we want you guys to hear. And so I want you to hear me say this. If the reason you came to camp is because you thought it would be so much fun, that's awesome. I am so glad that you are here at camp because you thought it was going to be fun. And along with that fun, you know what I hope happens? I hope you hear about Jesus. And I hope you fall in love with him. Maybe some of you have heard of Jesus. Maybe some of you have grown up in the church. And maybe you're going to experience Jesus in a new way this week. And the only reason you came here is because you thought you were going to find a cute guy or a cute girl here. That's awesome. I'm glad you came for that reason. And I hope that beyond that reason, you encounter Jesus. All right? And so we have this little visual aid. All right? This represents the flesh. This is our Pine Springs t-shirt. Boom. Spoilers. All right? This is our visual aid for this phase of our life, right? And what my goal is, what I would love to have happen after tonight, is that maybe some of you would move from one phase to another. All right? I'm going to show you what some of these other phases are too. Because how many of you have parents who say, hey, you're going to have to take care of yourselves next week because I'm going to grown-up summer camp? Right? No, you don't. You are a liar. No grown-ups go to summer camp in the summer. They don't go to Pine Springs. There's no grown-up Pine Springs where they come and they sing songs and they like throw mud balls at each other. They don't do that. As you get older, if your parents go to an awesome adult summer camp, you need to let me know where it is because I want to go there. But most of us, all right, as we get older, unless you go to youth ministry, you don't need to go to summer camp anymore. You get a job where you work all year round and you don't have like a start. You know how like right now your year starts and stops from the beginning and the end of school? And then you have this like thing that's called the summer break. That goes away. Like it doesn't exist anymore after you're like what, 20 something. After you're 25, you get out of college. Or if you don't go to college, you stop when you're 18. And you get a job and you don't get this giant summer break. And your year is just a constant, never-ending circle. And it seems miserable. Sometimes it is. But that's what your life is. And you don't go to these awesome flashy camps like this. But your questions move from is it presented well to does it taste good? All right? And some of you guys, you might have experienced this in your own life. Some of you might have experienced this through listening to conversations that your parents have. All right, I have this visual aid. This is the Songs of Faith and Praise. All right, to represent our normal Sunday morning worship time. All right, because for most of us, that's where we interact with Jesus most. That's where we respond to him. That's where we get to know who he is. And sometimes the question we ask when we go to church is, did it taste good? And we don't really ask it that way. We ask it as we leave church by saying, you know, that song leader led the songs a little too slow, or a little too fast. Or he led too many new songs, or he led too many old songs, or he led it too high or too low, and I couldn't keep up. Or the preacher was so boring today, and he was talking about stuff, and I didn't even understand what he was saying. I couldn't even pay attention. And when we talk about how the gospel tastes, okay? And before I go any further, let me say this. Because if you're here in this area right here where you're still asking the question, is it presented well? You are in good company. All right? Because this is not something that is new to your generation. It's not new to our world at all. This is something that God's people have struggled with from the beginning of time. And we hear in the story of the Exodus, the Israelites who've been enslaved in Egypt, and God hears their cries finally after they've been enslaved for hundreds of years. And he says, I'm going to deliver you. But I'm not just going to open the gates and let you walk out. I'm going to demonstrate my power for you. And so he demonstrates his power in these 10 amazing plagues, all right, that he sends on the people of Egypt. And people are amazed by what God does. And so the Israelites, finally, they are led out of their bondage. They're led out of their slavery. And God leads them to the edge of the Red Sea. Very good, very good. And when they're there, I don't know if it's a day after they've left Egypt, 2 days, it might even be the same afternoon, Pharaoh changes his mind, and he sends his army, he says, go get them and bring them back. So there, on the banks of the Red Sea, God says, look, remember all those 10 things I just did? It's pretty awesome, right? Guess what? That's not all I can do. Let me show you this one more thing. And he parts the waters. I don't know if he did it with his hands. This is how I like to imagine God parting the waters with his hands. He spreads the waters out, and Israel is standing there on the banks, and they walk through with walls of water on their left and on their right. And that is an amazing thing. And God demonstrates his power over and over for these people. And he leads them to Mount Sinai, and he says, I'm going to make a covenant with you, and you're going to be my people, and I'm going to be your God, and I'm going to give you the 10 Commandments. And this is what's going to separate you from the rest of the world. Everything about you is going to be different, and it's going to be because of these 10 Commandments. And he takes Moses up on the mountain, and as soon as Moses is up there, and God stops showing these cool tricks that he's doing, the people of Israel say, you know what? That was pretty cool, but now I'm bored. So what should we do? I tell you what, let's make a God that is cool all the time. Let's make a God that looks cool and it's shiny and it's pretty, and we can look at him and we can see him anytime we want, and he'll tell us to have cool parties and dances, and we'll have this amazing fun God. Let's do that. And so they build this God, because as soon as it stopped being presented well, they left. And they started looking for something that was. And that's the danger of this, is that as soon as we start getting bored, we start looking for the next best thing. And sometimes that's not a very good thing for us to follow. Okay, so now, we're back here. And we're asking ourselves, does it taste good? And again, you are not alone there either, because if you look at the story of Jesus himself, he starts his ministry, and he starts preaching to all these people, and he amasses a following of thousands of people who are following him. And they hear that he's going to be in this town, and they pack up all their stuff, and they travel days and days to go and hear the words of Jesus. And you hear stories of him feeding 5,000 and 3,000, and he does all these miraculous signs. And then he starts telling the people things like, take up your cross and follow me. And he starts telling them, if you want to be like me, if you want to be a part of me, you have to eat my body, you have to drink my blood. And people start hearing these hard messages. And they say, you know what? The revolution stuff was cool, because that's what he was talking about first. He's talking about, we're going to start a new kingdom. We're going to kick Rome out. Or he never said that, but that's what they thought he was going to say, is we're going to kick Rome out, we're going to reestablish Israel as the dominant nation in the world. And so that's what they love to hear. They love this revolution talk. And whenever you start getting into these harder messages, people say, you know what? That's not really what I signed up for. And they start turning away. Until at the very end, even his 12 apostles rejected him. And he was there alone. And sometimes we do that because we ask the question, does it taste good? Instead of this last question. How many of y'all have grandparents? They're still alive. I do too. I have been very blessed by the example of all my grandparents. And especially one, my mom's dad, Dwayne Johnson, who was a preacher my whole life and for a lot of his life before that. I grew up going, and he preached in these little small towns like Spade, Texas, and Brockmont, Texas, and these little kind of tiny towns. And I remember going to his church in Spade, and I was thinking, man, this is the worst. That's what I thought. I loved my grandfather, but I couldn't stand going to church in Spade because every single person in Spade was 90 years old. Right? And there was only 7 of them. Okay? So we would go to church, and it was awful. And like we were the youngest there by seriously 90 years. And it was just miserable, and it was boring. And my grandfather's kind of this old school preacher, and he just has this like, preacher voice, and he gets into his cadence, and he talks like a preacher. And I just remember growing up, I was so bored going there. But I remember seeing my grandfather walk from his house to the office whenever we would visit to go work on his sermon. And I remember seeing him sitting in his chair reading his Bible. And I remember one sermon in particular that he preached about the pearl of great price. He's still alive. I don't know why I'm crying. But he preached this sermon on the pearl of great price, and it was the first time that I remember Scripture coming alive and actually talking to me. And he talked about how the pearl was me, and I remember that was the first time that the Scripture became real. And I wasn't asking, did it taste good? I stopped asking, is it presented well, because it wasn't. But I started realizing it was enough. And I remember another sermon that I heard preached one time at Bundy Church Christ in Lubbock, Texas. And Doug Hale, the preacher there, got up and he said, it was during a normal sermon, he said, instead of my normal sermon today, I'm going to read you a letter. And he read us one of the epistles. He read it as though it was an actual letter from a real person to another real person, which is the way we should all be reading this book. And whenever he did that, the Scriptures came alive to me. It became something more than just a book of verses and chapters. It became a real story, a story that we're a part of, a story that God invites us to join Him in. And I'm finally getting to the point in my life where I can say, this is enough. This is enough. This book right here is an amazing thing. And it's full of words, but these words form a story. And this story is not just a made-up story. This story is a real story of a God who loved you so much that He created you. He didn't have to. Think about that. Think about all the heartache and the problems that you have caused God since you have been born. All the times where you've messed up, and all the times where you've let people down, where you've hurt other people, you've done things that you know you shouldn't. And God knew all of those things were going to happen before He ever created you, and still He loved you enough to create you. He said, you're worth all of it. You're worth me sending my Son to die for you. And guys, some of you want to be there. I know you do. I remember sitting in the seats where you are whenever I was your age, and I wanted to be there. I would hear stories of people who would talk about Jesus being enough for them, and I would hear stories about people doing awesome things because they trusted that Jesus was enough, and I wanted to be that, but I so was not that. I'm still not quite that, but I'm getting a little closer. And some of you guys want that. You want to be able to say, Jesus is enough. And it doesn't matter if there's awesome videos or flashing lights or smoke or lasers or anything like that. It doesn't matter if the sermon is preached well. It doesn't matter if the songs were even songs that I liked. Jesus is enough. And this week, you're going to have an opportunity to encounter Jesus in a very real way. And we're going to have amazing classes all week long that you're going to go to, and you're going to encounter Jesus through those classes. And we're going to have speakers who are going to come up here every night, and they're going to tell you stories about Jesus, and they're going to tell you stories about a God who's redemptive, and a God who's restoring, and a God who's reaching out to you. And He's telling you, just like He told the Israelites, He said, look at all these things I've done. Trust in me. See all of these wonders that I've done? Trust in me. And whenever Jesus told all the people that were following him, I am the salvation. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. Trust in me. I am enough. And he shows us still today through his word that he is enough. And some of you have not made the decision that he's enough yet, but you want to. And I know you do. And this week you're going to have an opportunity to make that decision. Not just one time tonight, not just every evening, but all day, every day. This week we're going to have people, we have counselors here who've given up their whole summer of going out and traveling and seeing the world. And instead of doing all those things that they could be doing, they're here with you because they love you. And we have people who gave up weeks of vacation time so that they could be here with you because they love you. And all week long, you're going to have an opportunity to encounter Jesus in a way that maybe you never have encountered him before. And it's our prayer, it's my prayer, that this week, if you haven't already, you'll make the decision to say that Jesus is enough. And I don't know if Nate's ready, but I'm ready to hand it over to him. So, here's Nate.
I am a sheep and a